Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, as the case may be. My name is Michael Parkinson. I'm with the Waterloo Region Crime Prevention Council, and if you're expecting a webinar on how to improve your business sales, you're at the wrong webinar. Today, we're privileged to hear from Dan Bigg from the Chicago Recovery Alliance, really the first community, I think, in the United States of America to establish a naloxone-based overdose prevention program. Dan has worked tirelessly in Chicago and beyond for many years. And in Waterloo Region, we've been privileged to have a colleague of his, Greg Scott, up here a few times. And if you've seen the film Eyes Wide Open, you should know that Greg Scott played a small but very important role in that film. Dan is going to take us through a couple of slides, and if we're all good, maybe show us some film clips. And he's willing to take questions throughout the presentation, or you can wait until the end. There should be a chat box on your screen. Christine will moderate questions. She's handling the technical end for us today. And just a few words before I get going. From the Canadian context, accidental overdoses are a leading cause of death, and recent coroner data from Ontario suggests that the number of people dying from an accidental overdose is now more than twice the rate of drivers killed in motor vehicle collisions, and those are opioids and primarily prescription opioids. So it's a bit of a crisis, and it's been a crisis for some time. 10 years ago, overdose rates in Ontario quintupled, but of course we wouldn't really know that because we don't have real-time monitoring like we do for other health events in hospitals across the province. At the federal level, naloxone continues to be a Schedule F drug, which means that it's not an over-the-counter medication. Meanwhile, in the USA, the Federal Drug Administration held hearings about a year ago to consider just that kind of move in the U.S. In Ontario and across Canada, naloxone is not made available by provincial governments. It's not on provincial benefit plans, and take-home naloxone programs are not funded. The exception is British Columbia, and they have a fantastic website called Toward the Heart. Just over a year ago, the Ontario government promised naloxone distribution through harm reduction programs. As of today, that is not happening, and additionally, they promised real-time monitoring in hospitals, and as of today, that is not happening. But following Dan this afternoon, we'll hear from Dr. Kieran Moore about what such a system might look like. At any event, I encourage you to take leadership in your communities and advocate where you can, and this really is a bit of a no-brainer issue. One day we will move forward, and we're looking for positive change, such as what we've seen in the U.S. Coming out of the Office of National Drug Control Policy like we did yesterday. So without further ado, that's the Canadian context. I'd like to turn it over to Dan now to knock our socks off with all the great stuff happening in Chicago and across the USA. Dan?
Thank you, Michael. It's nice to be with my northern friends, but I wouldn't take your socks off just yet. It's a little cold, but it's ironic to hear Office of National Drug Control Policy listed as doing something positive, but definitely there have been moves in that direction, and they seem to have embraced naloxone. I'm kind of curious why they haven't been using our military helicopters to spray it through the streets of the United States, but that's another question. What I'd like to do is just share a few slides with you, a few ideas about both our experience in the U.S. and what we've hoped to move towards. I'm very excited about it. As Michael said, we started the first program in late 1996. Actually, I should say we began developing our program then. I spoke about it publicly for the first time in the spring of '97 at the International Harm Reduction Conference in Paris. And my hope is that things develop over the next 17 years as they have the previous. We rolled our program out officially and everywhere, volunteers, collaborators, whatnot, in January of 2001. So we've actually have had a full program operating for 12 years, 12, 13 years. So I'm assuming you all can see what is on my screen. This slide is Y. Is there some way to get an affirmation of that?
Yeah, you're good to go, Dan.
Okay, thank you very much. So I prefer not to read the slides, but obviously you have similar imperatives to approach overdose as we do in the U.S. And I guess the thing to emphasize for us is that we've received over 4,000 reports of peer reversals. Each of them as dramatic as the next. My friend stopped moving, stopped breathing, stopped responding, turned blue. I acted, utilized naloxone, and he's alive today standing next to me. That kind of drama is pretty addictive, and you want to make sure you assist more and more people have that opportunity to intervene. We do have one of the best emergency medical systems in the world. We spend a lot of money on it, but tens of thousands of people are dying each year, and a lot of them in this area. Both Chicago and Baltimore have the heroin overdose capital of the world moniker to deal with, and there's simply because there's lots of heroin use. Interestingly enough, heroin overdose, and I should speak largely about opioid overdose for you guys especially, but there are some advantages to injecting a drug versus swallowing it with regards to overdose, and that is there's more discrete moment of identification of the overdose experience. So I'd just like to affirm that we as a group in the United States and you in Canada need to develop thoughtful means for us to deal with pill-related or orally ingested overdose events. For instance, can you plot based on the medicines you've taken, benzos, opioids, and opioids are involved in the vast majority of overdose events here. I believe it's the same in Canada. But how do you identify that time when the person's most at risk if they're swallowing medications, especially long-acting medications, especially combinations of things? And what role does sleep play or prevention of sleep in that? So there's a lot of issues that we all have to resolve as a community. But, of course, naloxone being unavailable is one of the simpler ones, as Michael said, a no-brainer. At this point, let me see if I can play a bit of this Eyes Wide Open video because it is so telling what this gentleman says.
First I started with chest compressions, which didn't seem to have any real great effect. And then I scurried through my apartment trying to find my Narcan, and then I did this so my just died. I took a huge breath away. It sounded like somebody drowning. I just got to the top of the water. At that point, I was kind of
And I got to say, could you all hear that okay?
I couldn't hear it very well,
Michael,
Dan?
did that come across? Now, could you not hear it or not see it or both?
Could not hear it.
Oh, shoot. Anyway, it played beautifully here, and I'll just describe it. It's the Eyes Wide Open video, which Michael and his organization produced, he mentioned earlier. Terrific video. It's actually so much like what we experience here, and that is, number one, chest compressions are irrelevant with overdose. In the dozen or so instances I've reversed myself, you don't even have to feel for the pulse. You can see the heart beating like crazy, working overtime to try to oxygenate the blood, but in the absence of respirations, it's a futile attempt. But you can see the veins, anywhere you see a pulse, you can see the blood pumping. So it's cardiac compressions are not helpful. As a matter of fact, I would even think they might be harmful with my uninformed opinion. But rescue breathing is what it's all about. To give you an idea of this essential role that rescue breathing plays in overdose prevention in the United States, we often prioritize it to the point is naloxone is irrelevant. The only thing that matters is adequate respirations. And this is certainly true. The bottom line is naloxone isn't available. I actually know of only one experience where someone went looking for naloxone, and in their absence, the person died of oxygen deprivation because it took them too long to find it. This was actually in Berlin. But you want to make sure, obviously, that it's available, because rescue breathing, as wonderful as it is very difficult to do. And but that needs to be the primary importance